I love it when I'm emotionally satisfied and not feeling anxious and having a good day, and I feel that tummy rumble. I love it. I'm just like, I know this isn't factually true, but in my mind, I'm like, there goes half a pound right there.
We are about to launch.
Intro time?
Intro time.
Truth Not Trends. What's up, everybody? TNT Strength live in Oakland, California. Hey-o. Whoa, we're here. We're talking, what are we talking? We're going to find out in a second what we're talking about. This is the podcast where we help you maximize your strength as safely and efficiently as possible. My name is Jesse Schmidt. I've been a strength coach for 2,601 days. Ooh, that one extra day is important, folks. My name is Liam Bauer. I have been a strength coach for 36 years and counting. We had our sound engineer, Desmond Cappy McNeese, come to us with some curiosity about intermittent fasting, sometimes referred to as time-restricted eating. They're used interchangeably, and so we're gonna get into the weeds about that today. We're digging down deep. It's not necessarily a strength training question. We talk nutrition around here too, folks. We're talking about things that are good for you, healthy. Nutrition is the most important thing you can do internally to support the function of your body and your life. Strength training, of course, is the most important activity you can do to basically support everything else out there in the world. So to combine the two, you're ready for bam, boom,
Bing!
1-2 combination of super results. That's right. I mean, I guess, right, if intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating help you reduce your body fat, and body fat stored in muscle is intramuscular fat inhibits muscular contraction, then we could make the argument that fasting does help with strength. That's true. There we go. I like it. Brought it home. Full circle. There you go, folks. That reminds me of this crazy buddy I had back in college. I was a punk rock dude who had this song called Everything Equals Vietnam. And no matter what anyone would yell out in the audience, he would like make it equal Vietnam. Like somebody would go, yogurt. And he would be like, yogurt, milk cultures, foreign cultures, other countries, Vietnam. It would always, he could make anything equal Vietnam. So everything equals strength training around here at TNT Strength. There we go. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Before we get into this episode, we want to remind you to visit tntstrength.com and check out our delightful assortment of nutritional supplements. There's 5 of them. Five of them. Count them. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've got a D3K2 supplement. That's right. Oh my God, so good for those immunities. Yum, yum, yum. I love the fact that Cap threw that one in last time around.
Immunities? What the hell are immunities?
Well, I ain't sticking around to find out.
There's also a creatine monohydrate. Good for the brain, good for the muscles, good for strength, good for power, good for Eric Fong. Yum, yum, yum. How about a whey protein isolate? There you go. You got to get those wheys in there. We don't know what whey is. Jesus, curds, whey. What was little Miss Muffet thinking about? She was just sitting on her tuffet. After the whey, you got your omega-3. Your fish oil. The fishy goodness. I love it. And last but not least, the probiotic for your gut health. Keep those tummies happy. There you go. So at TNT Strength, we recommend a high protein, whole food diet. But, if you need a little extra push, these supplements can be very helpful in a pinch. And particularly creatine monohydrate, we recommend everybody just take it. Just take it. Stop crying about it. Tons of research behind it. Throw it in your mouth. Drink it down. There you go. So they're at tntstrength.com. Free shipping anywhere in the continental United States. So mix up that protein shake. Bite me outside the continent. Sit back and enjoy this solo round with Jesse and Liam. Boom, baby. So we talk a little about some stuff. We're talking about stuff today, Cappy. Guess what we're talking about?
The boys today are going to be talking about fasting.
Wow. How did you know?
On my request.
fasting.
On Cappy McNeese's request.
I'll do the intro.
Okay.
Well, not the intro, the soundbite intro. So we talk a lot about fasting, and that word gets thrown around, and no one, everyone just assumes just don't eat. It's that simple. And I don't think it always is that simple, especially if you're toying around with intermittent fasting. I got curious about this because I am getting back, on a more stringent intermittent fasting. I've been kind of playing fast and loose with my fasting, pun intended. And, I've been experimenting for a long time, and it's pretty obvious that my relatively healthy eating habits are not compensating for my calorie intake. And the easiest way for me to adjust my calorie intake is for intermittent fasting. If I shrink that eating window, it's harder for me to overeat. So I've been getting back on it. And so you guys can talk more about long-term fasting. I'm not getting ready for a week-long fast, but I think it'd be, good for people to know who are interested in that. What's a good way to lead up? You probably don't want to eat Thanksgiving dinner, and then go directly into a fast. You probably want to ease into it more than that. But for me, my biggest curiosity, the big question that I really want answered is if I'm in the middle of an intermittent fast, if I'm fasting from 8 p.m. to 12 to noon, and I'm cleaning up my son's breakfast and I eat a piece of bacon, did I just erase anything that a fast has going for? Like, should I just eat breakfast at that point? Should I just ingest 400 calories just to, or is that bacon as good as sipping some water?
That's a good question.
Here we go.
All right. Well, first, let me dive.
Desmond took us up the lift hill, and now we're going to take the dive.
There we go. All right. Welcome back. Truth Not Trends. We dig into science and health and wellness with my co-conspirator,
Chewbacca.
a.k.a. Jesse Schmidt, the myth, the legend, unstoppable.
That was my Chewbacca. It was terrible. Really bad impression.
Oh my God. So let's start first. Thanks for that amazing question, Des. Let's start first from my point of view. There's a difference between time restricted eating and intermittent fasting, right? So time restricted eating involves limiting your eating window, kind of like you mentioned, to a certain number of hours each day. And intermittent fasting involves alternating cycles of literally not eating, right? And then actually eating. So fasting means you are not eating, and time restricted eating is really just shortening that window within which you do decide to take in calories, right? And they're not the same thing in my book, but they both are effective ways to both restrict calories and cause other potential benefits. Okay. For most people, I think it's probably easier, not all, but most, to reduce the window, as you're mentioning, which is time restricted eating versus just not eating, right, for 24 hours or a longer period, right? That's can be more of a challenge for some, but they both have benefits. But anyway, let's start from there.
And then another thing to add is that, both time restricted eating and intermittent fasting, another umbrella you can put them under is what we call a way of eating, right? So similar to, vegan or carnivore, keto or vegetarian or South Beach or paleo or Mediterranean, all of these are different ways of eating, and some of them can overlap, right? Absolutely. Like I could eat a carnivore diet and practice intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. In fact, intermittent fasting or time restricted eating could couple with any of those diets we just mentioned, or not. I think that, these two strategies, time restricted eating and intermittent fasting, tend to be particularly effective for people who have trouble snacking. They take in extra calories because they eat dinner, and then an hour later they have a big bowl of ice cream or a family-sized bag of peanut M&Ms or whatever it might be. But if you know that that's your Achilles heel, and you could create a rule like Desmond Cappy McNeese over here, where, well, the clock struck 8 p.m. and I don't eat past 8 p.m. So when I have that temptation, now there's a rule that prevents me, that keeps me from kind of sabotaging myself, right? So maybe you have those peanut M&Ms at 7:59, but if you don't finish the bag by 8 p.m., sorry, the bag's going back in the cupboard, man.
Yeah, you got to put the little clip on there and tuck it away till tomorrow. Yeah, as I concur. No, yeah, a lot of those things I agree with. I definitely think that it's a strategy that you can implement with any other type of eating plan. So it can be supportive or sort of, synergistic, if you will, with like any other style, whether again, paleo or South Beach or a vegan or whatever, carnivore. You can also add in these time restricted and or actual fasting areas in your plan, and they both have benefits. I've experimented with both intermittent fasting and time restricted eating for many, many years. I've done very long fasts, or long fast to me, which is like 7 days is the longest I've ever done. I regularly do, like 24-hour fasts, and sometimes even I go, 48 hours, 36 hours. And I've gotten to a point now where it's pretty simple for me to have those more extended fasts.
What triggers those for you? Do you come out of a holiday season where you actually had more calories? You're like, all right, I need to reset. Is it just kind of a every 3 months you just kind of do it? Is there a trigger for you to go and do a fast?
For me personally,
Liam has a funhouse mirror in his house, and every once in a while he catches his own reflection.
I'm like, why is my head shaped like a light bulb, and the rest of me is really looking bad? Yeah. So that's a great question. And for me personally, it's probably the first thing you mentioned. Like, if I feel like I kind of got crazy, over the weekend, or, I had a whole pint of ice cream and blah, 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 whatever, it just went a little hog wild. I'll often fast the next day to try to, shut down that caloric surplus and kind of reset. But as a general rule, I've been playing with the time restricted eating windows probably pretty consistently since about 2019. I had started exploring on and off many years before that, but regularly since about 2019, I've been doing the time restricted style, and I've experimented with like the 16/8 and some of the popular methods. And what I started for myself is most recently is once I wake up in the morning, I don't have my first calories until 4 hours after I wake up, whatever time I wake up, because I wake up at different times on different days. So I wait 4 hours and then I begin my first feeding. And then I have about 8 hours worth of feeding from then on, whenever I started. So, and usually it's about 3 feedings in there, 3 meals, whatever you want to call it. And then I shut it down. So the time.
So you have an 8-hour window every day.
I have an 8-hour window, but it varies when it begins. Instead of like always starting at noon and shutting it down at 8 p.m., I start at 4 hours after I woke up.
So it's probably different for most people.
Yeah,
most
absolutely.
people do it like Desmond, where you're just like noon to 8. That's
exactly.
the window.
Yeah. And so it's just a way I've been using lately. So like, because some days I wake up at 4 a.m., so I wait until 8 a.m. to have my first feeding. Another day I might wake up at 10 a.m., right? So I might not start till 2. So just depending. But yeah, that's just one way to do it, and it's working okay for me. And the longer fast for me, I find, I mentioned this the other day to someone else, but like initially I would experience this wave of hunger that would show up on I'm talking like at least a 24-hour fast. I would experience this wave of hunger, and I'd have to kind of let that wave sort of wash over me, if you will. But once it passes, for me, it doesn't return. Like, I don't get continued spikes of hunger. Like, I get this big wave, I feel it, I go, okay, I'm going to ride this out. I got to just, let it go, drink some fluids, not get triggered by it. And then once it's gone, what's kind of weird is I get to this place where I feel like I could literally just not eat anymore. Like, I think I could not eat for the rest of the week. You know what I mean? Like, once that big wave passes by, and I have to sort of decide when I'm going to start eating again, because I don't get repeated spikes of hunger.
So for you, it's going to be different for everyone else, but just to help educate people, like for you, when that wave of hunger comes, is it better for you to just kind of sit down and, relax for 20 minutes, or get busy and forget about it?
One thing I try to do is stay hydrated for sure during that time. And especially I try to drink some fluids to kind of feel like there's something in my stomach. And often for me these days, I'm drinking a lot of green tea, but also I like cold water, because cold water empties out of your stomach sooner, just for those who are trying to get hydrated. your body will process it a little more quickly when you're trying to get hydrated quick. But so I'll drink a lot of fluids on that during that hunger wave. But now what I'm finding is the wave is smaller than it used to be, right? And now it's just more like a little, like tide pool wave. I'm like, whoop, there it was. And now I'm fine. I don't get the big sort of hit like, oh man, I'm getting a little crazy hungry right now and I got to ride it out.
We also practice the face slapping method, right? So, stop feeling so hungry. And that really,
Jesse really enjoys that one.
I get to assist on that one.
Yeah, he likes that.
Don't ever underestimate a rolled up newspaper on the nose.
Yeah. I think it's important to state that, the primary reason why most people will use a strategy like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating is to keep their overall calorie balance in line, right? So, let's just say the average person, which, this number is going to vary, but let's just say the average person has an active calorie burn of 2,000 calories a day. That from noon to 8 p.m., you're getting 2,000 calories. And it's when you stop at Starbucks before noon that you get your 300 calorie mocha and a croissant. And after 8 p.m., when you eat your bowl of ice cream, and that's where you get the 500 extra calories, then that strategy becomes effective for you because now you're like, well, I don't need to go to Starbucks anymore. I'm going to brew my coffee at home and I'm not going to even touch that ice cream because I stop eating at 8 and I don't get the craving until 8:30. So yeah, I kind of agree with Liam. Like when I just heard Liam's stomach growl. That was funny timing on that
one. I haven't eaten anything today.
But yeah, having that discipline in place, it's kind of nice because it gives you a reminder of the whole reason you're doing, having the practice in the first place is to like hold that discipline, and it keeps you focused on that goal of maintaining a good healthy calorie balance. So, most people, right, like most Americans have a couple pounds they could stand to lose. And so most people are looking at time restricted eating or intermittent fasting as a fat loss strategy. So it's also important to note that in any fat loss strategy, regardless of what, eating pattern you're following, be it vegan, carnivore, intermittent fasting, Mediterranean, you name it, the strategy has to be in a calorie deficit. That is what causes the body fat loss. And we're going to talk about some other things here that are also related to body fat loss and that complement that proper calorie balance.
Let's get back to your bacon question, though, because that's what all started. So in my personal opinion, it's not going to have a negative impact, right? Like if you literally had...
What's the original question?
Was it like he's been fasting for 8 hours or so, right? And his son is chowing down and he snacks a piece of bacon off the plate and eats that one piece of bacon, right? He hasn't eaten anything else. He didn't eat the ice cream or finish off the pancakes. Mm-hmm. He just took a piece of bacon. Now, is his fast ruined? Should he go ahead and eat everything else on the plate? Or should he continue on as if it wasn't really interrupted? Yeah. To me, that one piece of bacon, number one, is fat, right? Which is bacon is mostly fat, some protein. Fat is essentially insulin neutral, right? So like it doesn't trigger an insulin spike. And that's really kind of one of the reasons why fasting is being incorporated is to, control insulin. And honestly, many nutrition plans have that goal in mind, insulin control, whether they openly discuss it or not. So fasting is good for that. It's one of the benefits. But so now you've eaten something that's basically fat and maybe a little bit of protein, salt, whatever. To me, it's not going to cause like much of an insulin response, negligible. And it's also not a lot of calories, right? You literally are eating one piece of bacon.
If you have
like a half of
now, if you eat a plate of bacon, and that was 500 calories, that might be a different story.
But that's not what you were saying, right? So you're saying you sort of zipped up one little piece. So to me, it's not a reason to stop or to have messed it up, right? Some people do that bulletproof coffee thing, right? Or, keto coffee, whatever you want to call it, which is, coffee with a lot of fat in it and nothing else. There's no other stuff. Again, it's essentially insulin neutral. It is calories, but it's not going to cause much of an insulin response. You could literally get up and eat a stick of butter in the morning or whatever, right? There's a lot of calories, but it's not going to have a big insulin response. So when you do these things that are mostly fat, it's probably less of an interruption, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a total expert in this area, but that's what I feel. Especially the way you described it, is that like 1/2 a scoop of bacon or something. But yeah, if you got up and ate Captain Crunch or something, obviously it's done, right? And you kind of started your day at that point.
And again, yeah. So again, there are different reasons why you might be, having this, fasting strategy. If you're a type 2 diabetic, that might, right, the insulin response might be particularly important to you. If you're a normal healthy individual who's just trying to snack less, Captain Crunch versus butter coffee or a couple bites of bacon, right? Not as pronounced of a response probably for you. But for most people, the key is, again, keeping that your overall calorie count in the proper range. And where people really get in their own way is they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they go, okay, I had a bite of bacon, it's over. And then they eat the whole plate of bacon.
Right.
That was for the family. And now, what you said, screw it. I'm not going to be perfect today. So it's just a wash and I'm just going to sabotage myself. So don't let,
that's a pattern
don't let great be the enemy of good.
That's a pattern that repeats itself with many people, just in general dieting strategies. That they mess up one little thing and then they just, okay, well, this day's ruined, and then they just spend the rest of the day eating shitty or whatever.
Well, and it's crazy too. Like I notice if I'm particularly hungry in the morning, or we're having, we're just kind of hanging out as a family, and I decide to join them for breakfast, like I am starving at noon. Like if I just fast all the way to noon, I might get a little hunger pang around 10 or 11, but it's no big deal. But if I eat at 8, I am fucking starving at 11. So
yeah, and it depends again often on what the source of those calories are, how you'll respond for sure. And again, more carb based stuff will probably make you hungrier faster than the more fat stuff, which is why the keto coffee or whatever bulletproof coffee branded is become so popular for those type of people who are using, following that plan. I've never been a coffee fan, but I experimented with bulletproof coffee every day for like a year, just because I like to have actual practical experience when I can talk to people about it, what my, I actually want to have done it, rather than just being theoretical.
So consider this, Cap. Most of us have a couple extra pounds of body fat on our body, right? Body fat, adipose tissue, is stored energy. When we don't take in calories from food, our body has to keep running, and it's going to start using body fat for energy. It's going to start to metabolize body fat, right? So I think one thing that can help is to understand that when you're having that, you need to understand first on an intellectual level, when you're having that hunger pang, it's an emotional state, right? You are not going to starve, right? If you're like the average American and you got 20 pounds of extra body fat on you, that means that, so 1 pound, we equate to about 3,500 calories. That's like a day and a half, right? That means you could survive for roughly a month without any food. And I'm not recommending that at all, right? But if you have 20 extra pounds of body fat, if you were lost in the desert, and let's say you had water, but there was no food, you could potentially survive for 30 days with no food, just your body eating itself. And so when you're in the middle of that hunger pang, it's important to try to check in with yourself, right? Take a deep breath. Remember that you're okay, right? You live in America, right? This is a developed country, right? We are not malnourished. I mean, well, you could argue that, but we have an abundance of calories, right? Anytime we want them, if you are not living in poverty. And so really you have to check in with your emotional self and realize that, if you ate a good high protein snack or meal, you could probably take in 200 or 300 calories, and those hunger pangs would be gone, and you could be full for 4 hours. So, and I've noticed this with myself, right? I used to go I take a run every Friday, and I run about 6.5 miles, which, we equate 1 mile to about 100 calories of calorie expenditure.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
So, if I run 6 miles, I might feel when I get back from the run, like, oh my God, I need to eat a 2,000 calorie meal. But I've only created a 600 calorie deficit through that run. And I have found that if I can check in with myself and I just have my normal day of eating now, because I realized that it's my emotional state, right, in the moment, and I'm in control of my emotions.
So keep in mind, Jesse, again, that classic number of how many calories in a pound of fat, right? That's 1 pound of fat is more than enough to fuel you to run an entire marathon. So, if we're going with this, again, this is all essentially theoretical, but again, 100 calories per mile, right? So 26 miles, right? You only need 2,600 calories, right? That's less than a pound of fat right there just to run that marathon. Like all these marathoners that are like I got a carb load, they do. I'm like, you got plenty, right? Unless they're like some hyper elite, right? Extra lean, you know what I mean? But the average Joe runner, yeah, they got enough fuel, right? They don't need to load up and fuel up or whatever, or like eating their goo halfway through, like they don't need it. Their body has plenty of fuel.
I love it when I'm emotionally satisfied and not feeling anxious and having a good day, and I feel that tummy rumble. I love it. I'm just like, I know this isn't factually true, but in my mind, I'm like, there goes half a pound right there.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, Cap. That's true.
That's funny.
Hey, what are those guys doing here?
Whenever I feel like I'm stalling out on my bench press, I know I need a new strength curve.
Whether you're stalling out on the road or stalling out in the gym, you need something with great engineering.
That's right.
So look for the pendulum. Pendulum.
Not just your average strength machines.
No, they have smooth strength curves.
Amazing rigidity.
And did we mention the engineering's fantastic?
That's right. Not to mention, they come in cool colors.
Like red.
And silver. Well, that was kind of weird. What was that all about? Back to the interview.
Just personal experience. I experimented with, time restricted eating a couple of years ago. And because I was following a pretty high fat diet, I realized I'm probably getting the calories I need for 7 days in 6 days. And so I started, because, Monday is like international, take care of all the work you procrastinated on Friday on. And so I
unless you're a master procrastinator like me, then that's Wednesday.
And then, so I just wouldn't eat on Mondays. And let me tell you, man, like Liam said, there would be a time or two during the day where I would have that kind of wave of hunger. But by the time Tuesday morning rolled around and I had my breakfast, I'm feeling great. I had a satisfaction, right? You get to have this practice of delayed gratification, which serves you well. I think there's kind of the psychological benefit of practicing delayed gratification. And there's also, I think, the physiological gratification there, which, Liam will talk about from the hormonal standpoint. I think they're, when we talk about like insulin sensitivity, I think that probably insulin sensitivity will help you be able to practice delayed gratification more. And so, just keeping all these things in perspective that we've talked about, like you have enough calories stored in your body to survive, missing a meal, missing a day's worth of meals. If your plane crashed in a remote area, you probably could survive for a week with no food.
You don't have to start eating everybody right away.
Yeah. Wait a day or two until you begin the cannibalism.
Start with a tube of toothpaste you found in the luggage.
But just saying, right? Like to know, oh God, astronaut food, yum. To know that you could survive that long if you had to, right? I think one of the major benefits of time restricted eating and fasting is it can help build resilience if it's the right way of eating for you.
Yeah, and I do think it's worth experimenting with, but some people struggle, and it's, as Jesse's saying, it's probably more an emotional thing. Talking about benefits of fasting. So research published in the Journal of Cell Metabolism found that fasting can improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, obviously promote fat loss, and fasting triggers a process called autophagy, right? Which is the body's sort of system of cleaning up the junk that's out there, right? It's eating up broken cells and, going through and doing its cleanup work. They clean out the damaged components, and it improves, function and longevity, all that kind of stuff. Another thing is that caloric restriction is the one thing that's sort of universally shown to improve longevity in basically every animal that has ever been studied in.
Whether so it's like a Japanese insects, concept of
worms,
like eating
mice,
until you're 80% full.
Yeah. So having a little bit less, being slightly underfed, is shown to improve longevity in basically every animal model. So there's no reason why it's not going to work in humans, right? We tend to not be underfed most of the time in America, right? So aiming that is probably a good thing. And if this is a way to control it, it can be very effective. I like the idea of sort of planning it out. And again, some people it's too you might purposely plan cycling your caloric intake, right? Purposely have days where your calories are a little higher than maintenance. Follow that day with like a total fast, like literally no food for 24 hours. Cycle it up and down, maintenance levels slightly below, right? You can do that. I used to do a thing which has been very successful for me, where I rolled a dice every day or flip a coin. And the flip a coin was just heads was maintenance calories, tails was 70% of maintenance. And I had 2 templates created. And this is a way I've brought my body fat down as an example. We call it zigzagging, but I've brought my body fat down from 17% to 7% in 55 days. And I've done it multiple times in my life. And literally, I just create 2 templates. I have a maintenance template and a 70% template. Flip the coin that morning, and that's what I'm eating, right?
See, Liam doesn't believe in muscle confusion, but he firmly believes in stomach confusion.
Right.
I do believe in muscle confusion because, I hit my pecs on leg day, and my pecs don't know what hit them.
I'll hit your pecs on leg day.
You got to hit your pecs on leg day, man. They won't know what hit them.
Yeah. So back to the caloric restriction. One of the arguments you hear from people like Dr. Jason Fung, who wrote a book called The Obesity Code, is that intermittent fasting, time restricted eating can increase autophagy, which is the production of new cells, right? Or increased production of growth hormone, increased fat mobilization and insulin sensitivity. The sort of another point that I hear other researchers make is that, those things are not specific necessarily to time restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Caloric restriction in any form can also create those same hormonal effects.
Yeah.
So important to remember. We're a broken record about this stuff, right? But you have to make sure that this is a strategy that works for you. People out there on social media, your friends, your family members, right? Everybody wants to be an evangelist for something, right? Everybody wants to say, oh my God, this worked for me. It's going to work for you too. It's going to work for everybody. And that's just not a scientific way to think, right? In this podcast, we talk about studies, research, meta-analyses. From time to time, we interview researchers, and it's important to zoom out and talk about what are we talking about here? What is science? Well, with a study, you have a researcher who has an idea. They're like, you know what? I think this might work for not just me, but for a big group of people. Let's see if that's true. And they do a study and they check it out. And sometimes it does work for, a big group of people. And in a good study, it's a specific population of people that is repeatable, and it's compared against control groups. And so we know that it's not just a flash in the pan. So sometimes when we talk about, science and research, people's eyes glaze over and we lose them. But it's important that all we're saying when we cite a study is, look, this works for more than just me.
Right.
It works for a lot of people. And, just because it works for 1 million people doesn't mean that it works for the rest of the planet, right? But that means it can work for 1 million people, right?
Yeah.
There's 8 billion people on the planet.
Well,
I don't remember anymore.
I'm often, you guys, if you're really paying attention, there's a bell curve, right? We got statistics. If we know anything about, a lot of people fall somewhere in that bell, but there's always outliers, right? And I always say, humans are expressed on this broad continuum, right? There are going to be outliers. That's why unbreakable is probably true. But anyway, so there are outliers, right? Always, there's no doubt about it. Of every possible expression of the genetic conditions of a human being, right, has been expressed on that continuum. And there's some strange stuff out there on the edges, right? And people don't respond. And they have a drug that they've studied and they expect a certain response from that drug. But there's always people, if you look at the physician's desk reference, right, a giant book that comes out with all the reactions to drugs, there's always these unusual ones that they don't expect. And of course, there's a tiny population that's exactly what happens to them, right? Everybody gets a headache, except some people, their toe falls off, right? And then that guy, like, whoa, why'd my toe fall off? You're like, whoa, you're way out there in the end. It does happen, but we don't talk about it because it doesn't happen very often. So yeah, that's kind of stuff is out there. But so they have found with the metabolic stuff that another study, right, published in Obesity Reviews, analyzed various protocols of intermittent fasting, time restricted eating. And they found that it controlled all these health markers like cholesterol levels, blood pressure. But again, as Jesse mentioned, it's probably likely that intelligent caloric restriction will have similar benefits, right? It's just for some people, this is a strategy that works, right? To have specific times where they limit their window or specific days where they're just not going to eat, right? Versus trying to cut it down every single day.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a strategy. Right?
Think of right, like each person is a door, and each of these ways of eating is a different shaped key, right? And with each way of eating, you're looking for the right key that's gonna unlock, right? Sustainable habits that you can not have to think too hard about, right? And for you, maybe starting eating at noon and stopping at 8 is the right way to go. For Liam, he's going to have an 8-hour window regardless of what time he wakes up. For me, I like to play around with fasting or time restricted eating. I'll give you one example. In a couple of weeks, we're going to go eat some all you can eat Brazilian barbecue, and we're I think our dinner reservation's at like 6:30 p.m. or something like that, and I won't eat all day until dinner. And then I'm probably going to eat about 2,500 calories at dinner, so
it's going to be fucking delicious.
So I will have gone, our reservations on Sunday, I will have probably gone from about 8 p.m. I will have fasted for almost 24 hours, right? And all I'll have is water during the day on Sunday.
I tend to do that day as well.
And so
you gotta have room for that freaking garlic bacon wrapped steak,
delicious.
Whatever. Oh my god,
garlic sirloin. So the funny thing, right? There's no magic in this stuff, right? I am not fasting on that day where I eat all you can eat because I'm trying to lose body fat. I'm fasting so I don't gain it, because if I eat my normal meals, well, first of all, I want to gorge on this one meal. So if let's say I ate my normal breakfast and lunch and maybe had a snack in there, and by the time it's dinner time, I have 600 calories to give for dinner. I'm not going to have as much fun at that dinner as I want to. So I want to put myself in a position where I can have one really big meal and not hate myself the next morning when I wake up. So that's a situational circumstance where you could incorporate this stuff. So even if you don't want to incorporate time restricted eating all the time, you could use it sometimes.
Yeah, and again, although we do enjoy lots of things there, it is protein heavy, as you can imagine. So chances are it's not going to be stored as fat as easily, right? We know we got the protein, is not as easily stored. We got all kinds of benefits.
We're the thermic effect of protein.
Exactly.
I can have 30% more calories from protein, and it will be a net zero.
So I do have a PDF that I put together for anyone out there who wants to learn more about time restricted eating, intermittent fasting stuff. And you can let us know, send us an email, shoot us a question. And it goes into some general information about it, tips to help you get started, how to try it out, and also compares and contrasts the 4 or 5 top sort of most popular versions of fasting, including the 16-8, eat, stop, eat, the 5-2. There's different methods out there that have gotten attention. So it kind of compares and contrasts these things. I got it all put together, a nice little PDF. You can get in touch with us. I can shoot it out to you when you're ever ready. I'm going to have to shoot it out to Desmond Cabby McNeese today.
Bang, bang. One last question that I had is liquids that might not, even things that technically have 0 calories in it. If you have a Monster energy drink, like, your body is still working on a lot of, like, your kidneys are working 110%. Like, is that, I would imagine, I can't imagine you can ingest that much taurine, caffeine, whatever is in there, and have your body not have some kind of a reaction. Is that going to cause an insulin reaction or anything, or is
there's probably a study out there that could tell you whether Monster energy drinks cause an insulin spike?
I think there is some evidence that non-nutritive sweeteners, right, because most of these things do have a flavor, potentially can still have a small insulinogenic effect, right? But it's going to be negligible. I mean, there's no doubt that non-nutritive sweetener drinks do help with caloric restriction, and caffeine has other potential benefits.
And again, Cappy, you want to ask yourself, why are you asking that question in the first place, right? Are you a type 2 diabetic? And I'm not you specifically, but if you're a person who's concerned about your insulin getting raised up, right, and keeping that, like, could be a type 1 diabetic too, right? And,
sure.
Type 1, type 2 diabetic, where you need to keep your insulin in, the right place. Otherwise, there could be dire health consequences. Or are you just concerned about, right, adding extra calories from, a caloric drink, right? And that's a great general strategy for everyone, or almost everyone, is to drink drinks without calories in them. So something like a diet soda is probably not going to be a killer for you, right?
Yeah, some of them,
if you're not a diabetic.
Some of these drinks do have a small amount of calories, like people assume. Like, you pick them up, right? Obviously there's a difference between Red Bull and the non-caloric Red Bull, right? A lot of these energy drinks have a ton of sugar, including Monster and Rockstar, right? You have to pick the ones that don't have any sugar, number one. Some still have small amounts of calories in them based on whatever the ingredients are. But again, if you're looking at a 0-calorie drink, if it says 0 across the board on there, you probably don't need to worry too much about it.
My truth, just for full visibility, I am, for all intents and purposes, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and without my caffeine and my energy drinks, that's my drug, so to speak. And obviously a much better choice than a bottle of bourbon. And
I would concur with that. I concur.
Yeah. So again, right. It's working for you. One other thing to mention, because this has been in the press recently, is does aspartame cause cancer? There's a guy out there, Dr. Lane Norton, who's got a PhD in nutrition and puts out a lot of content online, and he recently had a post talking about how he used to bash non-caloric drinks with artificial sweeteners in them for various reasons. But as he's gotten more familiar with the total body of research around artificial sweeteners, it's become clear that the vast majority of studies show there is no link between artificial sweeteners and cancer. So that's the tricky thing about research, right? Is that, the Huffington Post might put out some, article that says, new study shows that, link between aspartame consumption and breast cancer, or something like that, right? Which is a very catchy headline. And it might, if you're not, reading nutrition research on a weekly basis, you probably see that and go, oh shit, I better stop drinking my Diet Coke, right? And it takes somebody like Lane Norton to point out that, okay, yeah, there's one study, but there's, for every 2 studies that show there is a link, there are 8 more that show that there's not. And as you just pointed out, Desmond, if the alternative for you is liquor, there's no question, right? That, because alcohol, like, especially like binge drinking, right? Overconsumption of alcohol, what is that associated with, right? Cancer, liver disease, metabolic dysfunction, right? Sleep disruption, all kinds of, way worse things.
Yeah. And the truth is that the World Health Organization, like them or hate them, they basically have, redefined their alcohol guidelines over the years until more recently. They basically are saying there is no safe amount of alcohol. So like, there's never a reason to start drinking, right? People are like, hey, red wine's supposed to be good for me. I never used to drink, but I'll drink it because red wine's good. Right? Like, there's no good reason to start drinking if you don't drink now. And if anything, you definitely want to be aware of it because, the thing that we find, this is kind of a weird side note, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. Like in my experience in the fitness industry is one of the places where people lie to themselves or to their trainers the most is how much alcohol are they consuming? You know what I mean? I just had a talk with a client the other day and I, brought it up because they were struggling with calories. And I was like, do you drink? They're like, well, I have one Manhattan every night. Nobody just has one Manhattan every night, right?
Yeah.
Anytime if they say they have a glass of wine, they probably have a bottle. You know what I mean? There's a lot going on with that. And it's just something to be aware of, right? No judgments, but there's lots of reasons why it's not the best option. So drink as much Dr. Pepper as you want, Cappy.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
If you want to know how much alcohol Americans are consuming, talk to someone who works in waste management.
There you go.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
Let's bring this thing home here. So the original question was from Desmond. He's keeping an eating window of noon to 8 p.m., but sometimes he's cooking his son a tempting breakfast and wants to have a bite of bacon. Is it gonna ruin him? I think we've agreed the answer is no. With the qualifier that as long as he doesn't eat the entire rest of the plate of bacon, he's probably gonna keep his daily
pancakes, muffins.
Right. As long as it doesn't start an avalanche of the whole day's ruined, he's probably gonna be totally fine keeping his calories in a generally good range. And, if you're, let's say Desmond, were a diabetic or had a, blood pressure, issue or heart concern, one of those, chronic conditions, then you're right, it might be a different consideration. But for him, who's a relatively healthy individual, you can not stress too much about that one bite of bacon.
So whether you're considering time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, it's crucial to weigh the potential benefits against any potential risks and find an approach that works best for you and your lifestyle.
Boom, baby!
What's up, people? Thank you so much for listening to this episode of
Truth Not Trends.
That's right here at TNT Strength Headquarters, Truth Not Trends.
Please, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And don't forget to share with a friend.
You can find us on the web at tntstrength.com.
That's right, TNT Strength now coming to you in person at 5255 College Avenue in Oakland, California. You can call the studio 510-768-5421. You can also text us at 855-796-9905.
Or shoot us an email at contact@tntstrength.com. And whatever you do, stay off of that stupid blue bubbly bosun.
The sort of unspoken understanding, the way I interpret it is like, I've got this groundbreaking secret that I want to make sure I'm letting you know about for the first time, so I'm smarter than you. and then we just have to shatter their world, and then they act like we're just total idiots.
You just described parenthood, Jesse.
Mixed and edited by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It, LLC. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.
I concur.